Hello, I'm Hala Mahideen. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your look at the world of business and economics. This week, China's ageing population. The country will become the first nation in history to grow old before it becomes rich. How a political ideology has failed the country. Also this week, as the G7 rehashed climate change commitments to deliver $100 billion a year to poorer nations, we take a look at how the financial industry is failing to live up to green ideals. Despite massive investment in road and rail in Nigeria's business capital, the roads are still congested. Will moving to the water help ease traffic jams? Well, China's status as the factory of the world is under threat, not from the United States, which, along with its G7 partners, is looking at ways to slow its economic dominance, but from an internal threat, a falling birth rate. Demographics really matter. Fewer babies means fewer workers to power factories and economic growth. Back in the 1980s, Japan was looking like it would overtake the United States to become the biggest economy, but that all fell apart, partly as its working population began to shrink. Well, China looks likely to become the biggest economy by the end of the decade. Holding on to that position could become challenging with a fast-rising India, which has no limits on the number of children couples can have. Beijing has lifted the two-child limit because there were only 12 million births in China in 2020, down 18% annually, and the fourth straight year of declines. The country's population, currently at 1.4 billion, is expected to peak by 2025. Now, against its wider aims of economic and geopolitical dominance, it may come as a surprise that Beijing is actively engaged in changing the demographic makeup of Xinjiang, which the United States has called genocide. Its birth control policies could cut up to 4.5 million births of the Uyghur and other ethnic minorities in the region within 20 years. That's according to new analysis by respected German researcher Adrian Zenz. China isn't alone in facing challenges to its falling birth rates. It's a similar picture in many developed countries, from Germany to South Korea. In the United States, the population grew at its slowest rate since the Great Depression in the last decade, and its birth rate declined for the sixth straight year last year. But Europe and the United States have, to some extent, been able to counter falling birth rates through immigration. Well, with China tightening its security grip on Hong Kong, immigration isn't much of an option for Beijing. So with fewer people entering the workforce, it means less taxes to look after the elderly. Beijing's already looking at increasing the retirement age, as Katrina Yu reports from Beijing.
Wang Shuilian is 44 and looks forward to retiring at the age of 50. But she may need to wait a little longer. The Chinese government is set to raise the age of retirement by at least 5 years. Just one of the policy changes expected in response to the country's rapidly aging society.
I couldn't accept my retirement being delayed much longer. I was very concerned when I heard this news.
According to the results of a once-in-a-decade census, China's population is graying and growing at its slowest pace in decades. Since 2010, it expanded by 5.38% to 1.41 billion people, falling short of the government target of 1.42. Analysts say China is facing a demographic time bomb, and the numbers may be lower than reported.
In the 1980s, 25 million babies were born every year. Last year, the figure was 12 million. Even if you believe this number, it's less than half of what it was. The workforce is declining quickly, and China is losing its economic vitality.
The population is expected to shrink as early as 2022. This will impact China's ability to compete with other countries, and analysts say this could harm China's economic growth.
This will lead to the Chinese economy losing its vitality. There is an aging problem which threatens not only China's economy, but its defense and foreign policy. Previously, the Chinese government predicted the economy would be double in 2035 compared with 2020, but that will be mission impossible now.
China's labor force will lose an estimated 35 million workers over the next 5 years. People are also living longer, putting immense pressure on China's pension and health system. Almost 20% of the population are over the age of 60. China's aging crisis is made worse by the slowing birth rate. Families are having fewer children, despite government efforts to boost the birth rate by ending the one-child policy in 2016. In 2014, celebrity film director Zhang Yimou was fined more than $1 million for having 3 children. Though these penalties no longer apply, China's rising cost of living remains a barrier for families. Many are unable to afford having more than one child. Increasingly educated women are also putting off or foregoing having children altogether, largely because of workplace discrimination.
The real problem is actually the long-term career. There's no really social arrangement or government support for women with children and how their career should be rebooted.
The government is under pressure to abandon child limits altogether. Some say it's too late. Populations in China's northeast are already shrinking. Beijing is focusing on what it says are positive changes: increased urbanization and higher levels of education. It's dismissed claims its census figures are inaccurate. Wang Xuelian accepts that policy changes are coming, but hopes workers like her will end up better and not worse off. Katrina Yu, Al Jazeera, Beijing.
Right, let's get some analysis now with Dr Lauren Johnston, Research Associate at SOAS China Institute. Lauren's also currently working on a World Bank-funded programme about China's demographics, so just the person we need to speak to about this. First of all, what do we mean when we say that China will get old before it gets rich? And do you think that claim stands up to scrutiny?
Hi, Hala. Thanks for having me. The old before rich phrase was arrived at in the 1980s because of the one-child policy. China could extrapolate how, or at least on average, how quickly the population would grow or decline over, next decades. And they realized there was absolutely no probable growth rate that meant China's economy would become an industrialized and high-income economy before the population aging process had begun and before China's working age population began to shrink. And so for years and years, China's been really worried that by getting old first, they will never get rich because they will need to reallocate money towards pensions and healthcare without having yet reached the economic frontier. And, there'd be wage inflation and so on. So, but it is a problem that the thing is, there are some countries struggling under the weight of having a large share of old, and there are others that have managed to enter the high-income country even when they're old. Slovakia, Malta, I think Chile that may have fallen out again. So actually many countries today get rich after they're old, but you have to have the appropriate policy set.
It's a very finely balanced dynamic, isn't it? So do you think the decision that China's taking now to allow 3 children rather than the previous 1 or perhaps 2, will that help the country, or is it too little too late?
It's definitely a marginal move at a late stage of the demographic transition, which is the process of moving from high morbidity to low morbidity and high fertility to low fertility. It depends what China's ambition is. So if China wants its population to continue growing rapidly, then, or start regrowing rapidly, then yes, it's far too little too late. Many people are not having 1 child, but certainly fewer are having 2 and even fewer are having 3. So I think the 3-child policy is actually more a sign that China wants to give a small number of families the choice to have 3 if they want them. But it's not actually because China is seeking to recreate and to continue to have this very, very large population and large population growth. So maybe they've even accepted that population decline for some period might be their future prospect.
Now, we heard in a report from our correspondent in Beijing that some people simply don't want to have more than 1 child because they can't afford to. How do you think China should tackle that? They're going to need to offer a lot more than just tax cuts to get the numbers where they want them to be.
Sure. Chinese society is super competitive and very expensive in its urban frontiers today. So housing is expensive. If you want to have even one child, affording a house in a major urban center that's big enough to have your one child plus possibly your parents at some point is incredibly expensive, let alone to have a house big enough for 2 or 3 children. And then, of course, there's a lot of discrimination against mothers in the workplace still. Possibly the Chinese government could help that by stepping in to fund maternity leave rather than expecting companies to fund maternity leave, for example. And other reforms could include childcare, for example. There's very little childcare in cities. So again, unless you can afford the space to have your mother very close or, so on, then it can be expensive to take care of a child, let alone 2 or 3. So subsidized childcare would be another area that China can evolve.
Well, childcare is one aspect, but also they will need to take into account reforms to pensions and healthcare provision, because this is also a source of tension in the country, not least because of the different social strata within Chinese society. What are your thoughts on that?
Definitely, there's an incredible amount of pension inequality. There's many people with no pension at all or a tiny, meager pension. And there's some typically state employees in the rich urban centres who have quite generous pensions, which some argue is compensation for them having accepted a lower wage during their lifetime. But the challenge for China is to sustain, how can you have a fair pension system that's fair to the current old people, but also fair to the future of the country? Because once you have 35% or so of your country in retirement, it becomes very, very difficult to be able to afford their pensions without derailing the whole economy. And so this is the balance. And then you have the issue of inequality between pensioners as well as between generations and so on. So there's a whole lot of factors in this story, super challenging to manage across generations and between rich and poor within China.
Dr Lauren Johnston, Research Associate at the SOAS China Institute. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me, Hala. It was great to talk to you.
The traffic problems in Nigeria's largest city have been growing as fast as its population. Lagos residents describe long, uncomfortable hours sitting on gridlocked roads. Now, the government's looking at waterways as a potential solution. From Lagos, Ahmed Idris reports.
Investment banker Ogunyimika Jokotola moved to Lagos from Nigeria's capital 4 months ago to fast-track a rise in her career. But she soon found she has to trade certain comforts of her previous office to realize her dream in Nigeria's most populous city.
It makes me tired a lot than I'm supposed to be, considering I'm young. So most of the time I just keep telling myself the weekend is almost here, it's almost here, and just wait till Saturday to sleep it all off.
Like millions of Lagos residents, she must endure long hours in traffic getting to and from work. Experts say the city's population continues to grow faster than any other in the country. Passenger safety is a concern, and that's pushing many residents to buy their own cars.
Without public transportation system that is reliable, that is affordable, that is consistent and is sustainable, without that we will continue to have traffic problem in Lagos State for as long as the population is high, for as long as people are able to afford private cars.
There are more than 6 million motor vehicles here in Lagos, a city of more than 20 million people. And that means traffic congestion, which perhaps, but not surprisingly, can affect business. So the government here is investing more in water transport in an attempt to take some of the pressure off the roads.
At a local jetty, Isaac Ogbeni took 20 minutes to get to work by boat. That saved him 3 hours if he were to take a bus on a normal day.
I would prefer the waterways because the way Lagos is, everybody's on the road. Everybody's on the road. So we living at the suburb, the Ikorodu and some water areas, we are privileged to have this.
Yet despite the increasing number taking boats, the gridlock on Lagos roads continue to defy solutions.
Lagos traffic.
With so many stuck in traffic, Nigeria's first traffic radio station tries to lighten the mood and provide regular updates on congestion, with staff receiving information from officers on the roads.
When they give us information, on-the-spot information, our own job is to relay out to people, giving the power of radio.
There is also interactivity as drivers and commuters call in to report incidents. Businesses in the city continue to count losses in labor hours and revenue. And with the population growing, there are fears Nigeria's commercial capital may soon reach breaking point. Ahmed Idris, Al Jazeera, Lagos, Nigeria.
Although a growing number of financial institutions are setting zero emissions targets for their own businesses, the majority of banks, insurers and asset managers are failing to apply the same scrutiny to greenhouse gas emissions of their portfolio. That's according to research by environmental consultancy CDP, which says greenhouse gas emissions from a financial institution's portfolio are on average 700 times greater than their own. Under half of disclosing financial institutions, and only 27% of insurers are taking action to align their portfolios to well below 2 degrees Celsius. The consensus agreed among scientists to limit climate change. And according to a coalition of non-governmental agencies, the world's biggest 60 banks have provided $3.8 trillion of financing for fossil fuel companies since the Paris climate deal in 2015. Well, let's unpack all the numbers with Emily Kreps, the Global Director of Capital Markets at CDP. And Emily joins us now from New York. Just first of all, why are financial institutions spending a lot of their time and money on greening their credentials, but failing to tackle their clients' portfolios? Why is this?
Well, good morning, Hala, and thank you so much for having me. I think from a financial institution's perspective, it's easier to start addressing the positive and the opportunity side of the financial institutions. But as they start to understand the impact to their portfolios and how investors in the market will measure that impact, they're starting to look at how they measure their financed emissions, the impact that they have of financing other companies.
Isn't it easier to divest than to challenge companies that are slow in moving along the climate track?
Well, it may be easier to divest, but it's really a risk transfer issue. And one of the concerns that we have as an environmental nonprofit is really to say, how does that risk transfer? And even if one bank were to divest their exposure, there will be someone else to pick it up. And so as we look at this from a planetary boundaries perspective, that divestment doesn't achieve what we need to with the Paris Agreement. So as a bank, if you look at it purely in financial terms, as a bank looks to divest, that's a risk transfer both from a business risk and a physical risk transfer that should arguably be put into the price. And I think that we won't see a stop from an activism perspective in terms of chasing those assets and ensuring that they really are transitioning, so that we need to get to a 1.5 degree warming scenario by 2050.
Now, there have been some success stories, notably hedge fund Engine Number One. They've taken 3 board seats on Exxon's boards. Do you think this is a sign of things to come? Are we likely to see more activist funds, and are polluters on notice?
I think we are. So at CDP, we're an environmental nonprofit that runs a global environmental disclosure platform for the past 20 years. One of the first questions we've been asking for 20 years of any company that discloses to us is what the board oversight of board governance is on environmental issues. And what's very interesting, and you'll see in the report, is a number of financial institutions all talk about the board oversight. But then the question is, are the boards moving fast enough? One of the interesting things about the Exxon case is that not only have we seen shareholders step up because they themselves have made commitments to ensuring that they're getting both the information and the action that they need from the companies, but also we've seen the banks themselves saying we need to understand what the impact is that we're financing, and we need to make sure that there are credible members of the board who are having good oversight of this. So I do not expect this trend to abate anytime soon.
And now when it comes to the likes of Shell, they're particularly keen to offload their Nigerian oil assets, and there are reports that they're getting ready to sell off some of their US oil-producing assets. Do you think that's a good thing? Because when these oil assets are in private hands, they're no longer being scrutinised by shareholders or environmentalists.
Well, actually, I disagree. I think that even if the assets do transfer into private hands, that we do have a community of fantastically observant shareholders and watchdogs who will continue to look after these assets as they move from hand to hand. So I can't speak very specifically to Shell's strategy here, but I think that even as they think about risk transfer, that risk transfer will also be followed from an environmental accounting perspective.
Now, we're just coming off the back of the G7 summit. What do you think of what came out of that summit, in particular this rehashed or repackaged commitment from the G7 to provide $100 billion a year to poorer nations?
Well, I think it's really important for us to have an equitable approach to supporting a transition to a low carbon economy. What we're seeing as we focus on from a forward-looking perspective is that we need to transition. So this isn't just about companies that are currently high emitters or low emitters, but we need to put in place the infrastructure, the processes, and ideally invest in the solutions to transfer to a low carbon emission. So when we see the developed countries, step up to put more money at work, it's encouraging. But the question will really come at COP26 in Glasgow this fall to see, is this really going to result in further commitments from both the developed and the developing world?
Okay, fascinating stuff. We'll keep a very close eye on that, of course. But for now, Emily Kreps, Global Director of Capital Markets at CDP, thank you so much for your thoughts and your analysis.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Turkey is hoping tourism will recover this summer. It's been removed from Germany's list of high-risk destinations, but others, like the UK and Russia, are still advising against visiting the country. Sinem Kosioglu reports from Istanbul.
Serdar Balta runs a chain of small hotels in Istanbul's historic Sultanahmet district. Like many others here, he's preparing to reopen after a 15-month-long closure because of the pandemic. The coronavirus caused tourist numbers and revenue to slump by 2/3 last year. And the government is now vaccinating tourism workers and aims to attract at least 30 million visitors this year and revenue of $23 billion. But Serdar and other operators say that's too optimistic.
Of course, we don't wait a big potential about the request, actually. And if we start with exceptions with the 35-40% occupancies, and the target is to not a profit, actually, but not a minus end of the month, will be the good for the next months.
Yavuz Gengeri partially reopened his restaurant a week ago. But despite some financial support from the government, he's struggling to keep going.
There are very few tourists now. It's very quiet during the week and just a bit lively on weekends. It's not satisfying. We've been spending out of pocket for the last 1.5 years. They're saying tourists are coming today, this or that week. I don't see better days. We're worn out.
Many early bookings have been cancelled following an increase in COVID-19 infections in Turkey last month and travel warnings. The Elashe family from the United States had planned to visit in April, but postponed the trip for a month due to Turkey imposing a lockdown. They say their visit's been worth it.
For us, it's good enough. It's not empty to feel like weird, and it's not overcrowded to feel scared.
President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says some countries' restrictions on travel to Turkey are political. The country's main source of visitors, Russia, has halted flights, and Turkey is also on Britain's travel red list. Relations with Moscow have soared after Ankara discussed military support with Kiev over a buildup of Russian military forces on the border with Ukraine. And the EU and Turkey are also at odds over oil and gas exploration in the Eastern Mediterranean.
Russia is expected to resume flights to Turkey in late June, and Ankara expects a similar move by Britain after a NATO summit on June 14. But given geopolitical tensions, it still won't be certain it can reach its goal of 30 million visitors. Sinem Köseoğlu, Al Jazeera, Istanbul.
And that is our show for this week. But there's more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC. That will take you straight to our page, which has entire episodes for you to catch up on. Well, this is it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Hala Mohiuddin. From the whole team, thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.